my intention with the task force is to deal with the fact that the problems that we're dealing with are complicated, they're complex, and they can't be addressed with a single solution. Right? Now, that's a big challenge both for clients who are trying to find a solution and also service providers, because the clients, when they are looking for a solution, they ideally want to come to a single company to provide that solution, and nobody's got that. Conversely, the companies that have got solutions, they've probably only got part of the solution, but how do they come together to provide clients with something that's joined up? So I think that what with the task force has really emerged as a concept, as a philosophy over the last 3 or 4 years whilst we've been wrestling with all this. And the golden thread, I explain it as being the DNA of the whole process. In other words, it's got the core of what needs to be done from between different parts of the process, and it evolves as we go through. But it always at its core has got the unique IDs that go from step to step, so that you can start with a specification, maybe a performance brief, to say that in this particular healthcare facility, we want to achieve these sorts of outcomes. We want to deliver these type of treatments. Therefore, we need this type of built environment to satisfy that. We need this type of equipment to be in place, and we need these type of temperatures and things and ventilation rates. So that's a human-centered set of requirements, performance requirements. Then that turns into a design. The design then becomes a delivery. The delivery then needs to be maintained and ultimately recycled. So what we've got there is a thread of information, many threads of information, which then need to be federated and brought together. And that's broadly what we're trying to do with Active Plan. Okay, so the point about the task force is that what we initially started it off doing was identifying what information experts would say they need about a fire door or a smoke control system or a sprinkler system. And we spent the first year, 2 years building that knowledge base by holding many roundtable workshops where we got people who were profound experts in those individual areas to sit around a virtual table and agree what information they needed and why. And I think the richness of that information is greater than anything that I've seen has been done. And we've done that for 12 safety critical assets, and all that information that we then published free on the BIM for Housing website. Now, what we discovered though, and what we also did, there were certain things that it became apparent that people weren't doing in a consistent way, like the inspection of fire doors. So we joined together with some people that had done some really good work in healthcare, in hospitals, and we decided to try and apply that to residential. So we had a group, again, tapping into the Golden Thread community that we built. We asked for volunteers who knew a lot about fire doors, either as manufacturers or as installers or maintainers or inspectors, and we got them to tell us how they thought fire doors should be inspected. And we did it around the framework of the work that had been done in the NHS, because it made sense to build on what was already working, and we just tailored it to suit residential with the residence examples. And again, we've that was published and that's on the website as well. And we've more recently done the same for smoke control systems, dampers and things like that, and walls and fire stopping. So all of that is guidance. The challenge then is understanding how that can be applied. And what we've discovered over the last 4 or 5 years is, even if we put standards in place, the challenge is whether people follow them, and also the competence of the people that are actually carrying out the work. So that's a whole new area that we can't get too heavily involved in, because that's, remember that we're all volunteers. But the idea of the task force, we then decided that a lot of people were interpreting the regulations differently. So we set up a Miro board, which is basically allows you to sort of brain dump ideas, and we a couple of the people put down on that what they thought. So we had an architect and an electrical engineer, both of whom have looked at the legislation and started to and worked to try and interpret how it all works. So are you still there, Olu? Ollie, something's happened. Ollie?
Hello. Okay, I'm back.
Hi, you're back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hi. Yeah. Half video.
no
Okay.
problem. Yeah, so I don't know where you heard up to there.
You're talking about creating a backup, what do you call it? Backup task force for brain dumping ideas.
Yeah, so what we found was that there was what's driving things in the UK at the moment is tightened up regulations. So, but the trouble is the regulations aren't explicit. They say that these are the type of outcomes that we expect, but they don't tell the industry how to do it. So the challenge that we've got with that is that depending on who reads the regulations, they may have a different interpretation of what's needed than somebody else. So therefore, we are getting a lot where a consultant will perhaps be working for one client organization and they'll employ contractors in a supply chain and they'll say, this is what you have to do to comply with the golden thread. Yeah. And then another consultant will come along and they will have a different view. So that causes chaos for the supply chain because they're being asked to provide different information for different people. Now, the government, people have tried to get the government to be more explicit in terms of what they want, but they're not going to do that because they don't have the knowledge to say what good looks like. So, what I'm trying to do with the task force is come up with a consistent way of the information, the guidance being interpreted, and then say we've got some standardized libraries and solutions that can satisfy that. So, we have an architect and an electrical engineer who are both very dedicated to this whole thing, and they'd each this is about 2 or 3 years ago. They each had started to put together their different views as to what needed to be done, and I introduced them to each other, and they bonded and started and put it up onto a Miro board so that they could. I don't know if you know the Miro board, but you can see the
I
results of
do.
it. Yeah, and we then opened that up to the wider audience, and we've had probably 50 or 60 people all using the Miro board to interpret what needs to be done, who needs to do it, and all that sort of stuff. So that's publicly available as well. So these are all resources that are available to the task force. So the this last year or so, what we've been looking at is how can we take all this guidance, because there's an overwhelming amount of guidance, and have an interpretation of it that is consistent or relatively consistent, but also bring together different people, software companies, service providers who can work collaboratively to come up with some solutions. So my goal, for example, a good example at the moment that we had a meeting on last week, which is the new AWAB's law. Now, AWAB was a 3-year-old boy in Rochdale, I think it was, near Manchester, who died from exposure to mold.
Hmm.
And his parents had been trying to get the landlords, which I think was a council, to address the mold that was in their apartment. But it wasn't actioned or adequately quickly or whatever, and the child died. So there was a big inquest, and it was identified that was the problem. And as ever, it became a big public movement, and a law's been passed called AWAB's law, and it only came into effect about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's now a legal requirement on landlords, social landlords, that if a tenant reports that they've got mold, the landlord's only got 24 hours. They've got to act within 24 hours to address it, and they've got to have that's an emergency response, and they've got to fix it within 5 days, which is very complex because you don't know what the source of the mold is. It may be because of a leak. It may be because poor ventilation. It may be because of the way the residents themselves are using spaces. If they're drying clothes on radiators without having showers without opening a window and things like that, then that can build mold. So it's quite a complex thing to actually identify what the problem is. It's also quite complex to come up with a solution. So that's a good example of what I'm trying to do. So we've pulled together probably 20 or so people that have got an interest in this, and we're trying to come up with a standardized solution so that a social landlord can come to a team that's already agreed to work together. In the group already, we've got people who make and install humidity sensors. We've got people who are architects, people who are surveyors, people who are manufacturers who can then look at this in a joined up way. So that's an example of how the thing can work, and it's my objective to make the task force to a certain extent like an agency. So a group of people can come together to come up with some tested solutions, and then if a client has got a need for those solutions, they can come, and the task force can contract with the client to do it, and we take the plan is that we take a margin, so that there's something that funds the task force going forward. So that's the idea of it. Now, within that task force, there've been then quite a few different software companies involved. So the idea of the task force is that it's not just ActivePlan; it would be ActivePlan plus other software companies who have agreed to work with us.
The idea I'm getting is you're functioning as an integrator of knowledge professionals, so that everyone can work together.
Correct.
To solve complex problems, so that each person is not looking out just for what they can get or what they know, but the information gets joined together to solve the complex problems, which now solves the income or revenue problems or goals of the individuals.
Correct. Yeah. So just to build on that, I spent 5 years working in a research group that was trying to deal with the problem of transferring risk between people. So in most construction projects, there will be a main contractor who is appointed to deliver a scheme, bogus or something like that, and the client contracts with them, and then they have subcontractors and designers who are probably appointed on the lowest price basis, and the risk of things going wrong is then spread amongst all these different providers. So if one of them gets it wrong, then that can have a big impact on the overall project, and all of that is covered typically by a professional indemnity insurance, and the insurance itself then encourages the architect, the engineers, the contractors to work independently and to ring fence their risk. And the evidence is that that increases risk because everybody's only bothered about their bit of it. So about 15 years ago, I was asked to join over the years, I've done a lot, probably 30 years, I've been involved in what's called collaborative working. So the principle behind collaborative working is that the project is the key thing, and therefore it's the project that should carry the insurance, not the individual parties. And people should be appointed based on not lowest price, but their ability to do the job. A better way of working is that there's somebody, a good brief is produced, and then collectively a team of competent people then come together to provide a well thought through price for delivering the project, and everybody then sticks to that price and that specification. If something happens that causes a problem, then the whole group then contributes towards the cost of that, but they put in place an insurance policy over the overall project that's limited to maybe 10% of the fee, right? If it goes above that, then it's carried by an insurance company. Conversely, if the team works collaboratively and they can figure out ways of reducing cost because they can do things smarter in a more joined up way, then that cost reduction is shared between the team members as well. So they're incentivized to do that. So that it's a really challenge. It's a way of looking at things very differently. And we've now had probably 5 or 6 projects in the UK that have been done. We had to have a new contract written, which was part of a research Innovate UK project, and the lawyers had to write a new contract because certainly in the public sector, it's illegal for you to, well, it's perceived illegal for you to place a contract with somebody that isn't the lowest price.
Wow.
Yeah, but because of corruption and all that sort of stuff. But of course, the lowest price invariably never gets delivered for that price because there's always variations and things increase. So that's the idea of the collaborative working process. So therefore, the entity, which is the the project team that is a collaborative team, they will work together. And one of them may say, you as an architect may say, well, this is my vision for what we're going to do. And then the client comes back and says, well, I really need to save £500,000. So then the team, otherwise it's not viable. And the team can then say, okay, how can we do a redesign that the architect's happy with, but achieves that saving? And the principle behind it is everybody then pulls together. Now, that's what I'm trying to engender in what we're trying to do with the task force in a much simpler way, because all we're really looking at in the task force is information management. So it's important that we're not trying to find a new way of designing a widget. It's actually about information management.
When you were speaking, it seemed to me that this is what BIM was supposed to deliver in its definition and intent.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That BIM has been, to some extent, hijacked by the 3D modeling community.
Interesting.
It didn't start that way. I know it didn't start that way because I was involved at the beginning. But it's understandable because seeing a 3D model is the most articulate way of understanding, of seeing something. But I've got more heavily involved over the last few months with the smart building community, and more importantly, the people that are looking at how you can actually bring together smart buildings with BIM. And there's a big chasm at the moment between the two because they're using different standards. They are they're not having consistent purposes. So what is it that actually is needed? And I know the BIM side of things. I know the design and construction side of things pretty well, but I didn't know much about BMS systems and sensors and all that sort of stuff. So that's what I've been educating myself on. And what's become clear to me is that everything that we do in the BIM and also the asset management world is actually looking at things from a physical perspective. We're looking at how physical elements come together, and then how physical elements can perform, and also how they can deliver an outcome. Now, in the building control area, what they're doing, they're looking at things from a logical perspective. So they have a logical relationship between an alarm panel and the sensors, or an air conditioning system, all the elements that go to make up that air conditioning system, and what it's connected to. So what we've actually got, we've got a physical building, and we've got a logical building. So part of what I'm doing at the moment, I've got a meeting later on today with somebody that is, they're in that whole network base, and if we can bring those things together, then we've got a proper digital twin. So coming back to the point that you made, you're absolutely right that BIM is that's what BIM is supposed to deliver. But there's always this starting point that it starts with the Revit model. And of course, the Revit model to controls people, they're not interested.
Yeah, it seems that you really can't achieve much without including policymakers, because they seem to be the ones that motivate industry practitioners to change at the end of the day.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I agree. So I think for example, we're trying to get something underway in Hong Kong at the moment, and we had I think a pretty successful workshop webinar about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We had 700 people on it, and then of course last week we had the fire. Have you seen the fire in Hong Kong?
No, I've not heard about it. I'll check it up.
I think there's something like 130 people have died.
Wow.
It's far worse than Grenfell.
A high-rise building.
Yeah, 8 high-rise buildings.
Wow. I'll check it out.
Yeah, so
you're probably getting a lot more interest now.
Well, we were actually going to make a gesture to Hong Kong of offering our support and our resources and things like that. We're still planning to do that. But we've been advised that it's not a good idea to do that at the moment politically in Hong Kong. The Chinese government's very, very sensitive about it, apparently. So I've been working this weekend on producing press releases and all that sort of stuff, but we've decided to shelve it because of that. But the important thing, as far as Nigeria is concerned and Africa is concerned, if we can identify that we've got resources, we've got smart people in Hong Kong, we've got smart people in Nigeria and we've got smart people in the UK. And if we can bring those things together, then we've got something that is, quite powerful.
Yeah.
But rather than, for example, Hong Kong, going back and revisiting a lot of the things that we've done in the UK, because we had a similar situation, but that was 8 years ago. And a lot of the things that were put in place to stop it from happening again haven't worked because they've either not been clear enough or they've not been policed adequately, or they were solutions that weren't the real problem. So if we can share that with you, for example, then it means that whatever resources, whatever effort is put into it, then builds upon it. So it gives us a good starting point. But the lesson that I've learned just this last couple of days is that we've really got to take account of the political context
environment,
of different countries. Yeah. And certainly, I imagine in Nigeria, there'll be different ways that the authorities will consider that they are doing things. And it may well be, the view at the moment in Hong Kong is that there's probably been corruption and people have been installing substandard items. And that may be true in Nigeria as well. I don't know. It could be. So we've got to be careful a little bit about that. So in this particular case, OpenSpace was one of the applications that the contractor Rattigans used. So this is showing the integration that we've got with Revit. So we've got the Revit model, we've got the fire dampers there. They're connected into that's the COBie data, so the list of all where the fire dampers are. We've got the product library, which is tied back to the manufacturer's product data. And then we can then look at that as an active plan, the interactive plan view. So you can see where the fire dampers are. And also you can select the individual damper, see the schedule for it. And this is the 360 photo that was taken by the team that were doing the construction. So we've simply downloaded that into ActivePlan and then tagged it with the information for that particular fire damper. And then this is the documentation that came with that fire damper. So you've got then the operating and maintenance information that's specific to that fire damper. And you can also put bookmarks in to be able to take you to certain pages. In addition to that, we've got a digital record of the other buildings where that particular fire damper was installed. And the database also holds the information about how it should be maintained. So what the tasks are. If you've not got this video, then I can send it to you. But
yes,
the point is that the 360 photo has been taken, not by us. It's been taken by the contractor, and they just put hard hat on with a 360 camera mounted to it, and they walk around the site every week, and that's captured in OpenSpace.
Okay.
But
and that same 360 is what comes into ActivePlan.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So the 360 photos that we've got in ActivePlan. Let me got to the wrong version. So each of these spaces has got see there, it comes up the 360 photo. So here we've got the 360 photo. So by downloading the 360 photo into ActivePlan, it then can connect back to the asset data that is supposed to be in that room, or we can create it from scratch. And these are all database objects in the SQL database in the cloud. So they're also connected back to the maintenance information. So what we're doing is we're adding a lot of value to what Faro and people are doing. The Faro and OpenSpace and the others, they tend to allow you to tag something in the 360 photo, but it's not connected to the database. What's unique about ActivePlan is that we're actually holding this asset information, not in the 360 photo, it's being held in the ActivePlan database. So it means that when we go to that space in the, when we go and look at it differently, we can see the asset types that are in that room. So this is in the database, not in the 360 photo,
Mm.
and the individual products that are in there. And the beauty is that you can then look at this from a list. And if you want to know where that actuator is, you just need to go to that, and it remembers where that is. Isn't that cool?
Interesting. Very cool. What's the usual reaction when you show this to facility managers?
Wow.
I can imagine, because
Yeah.
it should just
That's your
sound
uncle
up
that's done
from-
that, by the way.
Mm,
But yeah, it's pretty good. And then, if you click on that, you can see all the detail behind it. And if the serial number and things like that have been captured, then you can see that. And you can also go into the detail of the type of thing that it is. And, if we've got the actual manufacturer's product information, that would be there as well.
Okay.
And any documentation. So the approach with Faro is that they are collecting information, or the contractors are using Faro to collect the information for construction purposes. We're just looking to use the same 360s that have already been taken for asset management.
Okay. Okay. So you want back-end permissions and access.
Yeah, I mean the access won't be Faro that will give that permission. It will be the contractor. So if ITB are using Faro, be interested to know what technology they're using, because there are many of them. So let me just give you an example. This is the way I'm promoting it. Oops. This is the way I'm promoting it.
Okay.
We're calling them Smart 360s. So the principle is that we've got 360 photo, which actually is quite dumb, because all you can do is look at it. And we've got the intelligent asset data. So we bring those two things together, and we create something called a Smart 360. We can then use that to tie that back into COBie data, 3D models, O&Ms, etc. We can tag manufacturer's product data to it, task libraries. So because it's in a database, you can do that. We can also, we're not bothered what type of camera is used to take it. It could be a simple 360 camera like a Ricoh or an Insta, or it could be a Leica, which is probably 30,000, 40,000 pounds, because it does a lot more. And then there's one called a Navis camera, which is one that you put on your shoulders and walk around, and they cost about 50 or 60,000 pounds. But they're LiDAR cameras as well. So they're both Leica and Navis. They don't just take 360 photos, they do point clouds. But most of the case, you don't need it. And then you've got all these companies who do the same sort of thing as Faro. Faro's solution is called Sphere HG. Faro acquired a company called HoloBuilder several years ago, and
Oh, really?
they've turned it into something called Sphere HG.
Yeah.